We're not negotiating with Canada right now. Their tariffs are too high. Their barriers are too strong. So we're not even talking to them right now. We'll see how that works out. It'll only work out to our favor.
Welcome back to Power in Politics. President Trump is again voicing his displeasure with Canada over NAFTA. U.S. negotiators have been working with their Mexican counterparts for the past 2 weeks to hammer out a deal. Senior officials from Canada, the U.S., and Mexico have all said that the U.S. chose bilateral talks with Mexico to speed things up, not to send Canada a message. So is this just more rhetoric from the U.S. president, and how concerned should we be that Canada isn't at the negotiating table? We're back with the Power Panel. James Moore, Brian Topp, and Yolande James. Yolande, why don't I start with you? You know, we have heard from all those officials that there's nothing amiss, but then we get this comment from Mr. Trump. What do you read into it?
Well, it's just a hard read because it's not very consistent with all the other statements he's made since the beginning of the negotiations. Now he's giving Canada the cold shoulder. At the beginning, it was Mexico. At some point, it was, well, we're not really going to change all that much anyway. So his statements kind of change with the times, but I'm not to minimize the fact that we should always be concerned. But I also questioned the authority that he has as the President of the United States to come to a deal with a bilateral deal with Mexico without the consent or the approval of Congress in this too. So given that the election is, the midterms elections are incessant, are imminent, we'll have to hope for some change there, but also that would probably, in my view, affect the fact that we should be okay, and that the long game in terms of things staying status quo looks like that most likely will be what's going to happen, that things won't change in the medium term anyway.
Mr. Moore, you're a member, of course, of the government's NAFTA Advisory Council. What do you think about what he said?
Well, it's not uncommon. In fact, it's very common for the president to say one thing and key members of his administration to say others. It's among the reasons why Gary Cohn left the White House. It's among the reasons why H.R. McMaster left. And there was an example of that not long ago when Dan Coates, his national security advisor, said that Russia is continuing to be a problem, when the president said that was a myth and that it's all a witch hunt. So it's not uncommon. But look, for conversations to happen between the United States and Mexico on a bilateral basis is not a bad thing. I think what ultimately matters is the final product. The gaps that exist between Mexico and the United States on autos and labor and other things are actually different, even on autos, than what exists between Canada and the United States. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Cliches are often cliches for a reason. It's because they're true. And one of the cliches around politics is, there are two things you never want to see being made: sausages and laws. And I think trade agreements actually might get kissed into that motto as well. But I think at the end of the day, for everyday Canadians, for all observers about this, what ultimately matters is the text and the substance of NAFTA 2.0, what it says, what it means, and how we'll go forward from there.
Brian, what do you think?
Well, I think two things. First of all, that I think the world is learning not to expect diplomatic niceties from the Trump administration, and that what Canada and Mexico have been seeing through these discussions is that we are negotiating with New York real estate developers. And they have their own unique style, and one of their unique styles is they try to generate leverage in public like this and sort of whipsaw you back and forth between the parties, trying to pressure us into giving them the deal that they want. And so this is just the beginning of what I think is going to be lots of drama in coming weeks as the parties circle around each other in this funny way to see where the deal is going to land. But the second thing I'll say is, substantively, where these negotiations are going is what we want. So Obrador, the new Democratic Socialist president in Mexico, doesn't agree with the maquiladora model in the Mexican auto industry, in which the Mexican auto plants try to compete with the United States and Canada by paying extremely low wages to their workers. And coming from where he's coming from the left of the spectrum, he wants his folks to be paid properly. And that is what we want too. We don't want to be in a free trade agreement with a country that is artificially suppressing the wages of its auto workers. And so, the discussions that are going on between the United States and Mexico, to the extent that we can see them, which are about trying to get Mexico to commit to better labor conduct and to higher wages for their workers, is what we want. And So far so good. If they come to an agreement that President Obrador supports, that's a good thing. And then we're down to some of the tougher nuts of this agreement.
I'm glad you brought that up because earlier this week we spoke with Raymond Bachand, Quebec's NAFTA negotiator. We asked him about Canada not being at the table right now, but he also talked about what you just mentioned. So I'm going to play that clip and then Yolande, I'll get you to react.
I'm not worried at all because we have the same interest. It's one subject that's being discussed with the automobile. If the automobile is resolved, let's say this week or next week, I think the trilateral discussions will resume. The question is at what pace and how much Americans are they willing to give concessions?
So, Yolande, that was kind of interesting because at one point he also said, you know, it's good that the U.S. is negotiating because our position on autos is, on this aspect of it at least, is the same as the U.S. and they're a really tough negotiator.
Yeah, well, and also depends on different strategies of negotiation. Like there's certain areas where the U.S. and Mexico might want to talk it through and to our benefit. But the important part is what's going to be the final. It goes back to that in the end. What are going to be the final? What's the final draft that all three countries are going to agree to? And as optimistic, of course, as Raymond Bachand sounds, and I agree with him with respect to the fact that I believe that Canada will come back to the table and be negotiating all together, despite Donald Trump's tweets. It's still a question of saying, then what? Are we really going to get over the other hump, supply management, for example, to essentially come to an agreement? Or is this the clock going to run out till the election and then the next even presidential election? It remains to be seen.
So, James, is this just waiting it out for us right now?
Yeah, but look, there's a new marker on the horizon that I think people need to sort of focus their eyes to, which is, look, assume that there's a positive outcome within the next, let's say, 60 days, that there might be a NAFTA 2.0. From there, now it has to be ratified by six legislatures. So the politics on this is not going to end anytime soon. You have the midterms in the United States, the transition to Lopez Obrador completed by next year. There's a Quebec election campaign on very soon, and that'll put some pressure on the current federal government. And then we have our own 12-month countdown clock to the next election campaign. So the dynamic of once you arrive at an agreement of having that passed in the domestic politics in all three jurisdictions, it's about to get interesting. This is not going to end anytime soon in terms of the debate.
Okay, unfortunately, I have to go, but thank you so much to all three Power panelists, Yolande James, Brian Topp, and James Moore.